So I guess it shouldn't come as much of a surprise to find out that the AI has found its way into education. We know it's actually been doing this for a while, but at this particular level, it's an interesting story. It concerns a professor here who has decided, he's over at UCAM, to involve and create a robot who gave a name to. He called it Bobula Robot, to deal with something that sounds like a good idea. And that's the fact that, you know what, sometimes students have different schedules. They work nights, they have jobs, so it's not always a matter of being able to get directly to a professor. So this robot, this AI, created, I think, by ChatGPT, manages to answer some basic questions and doing a pretty good job of it, apparently, as well. About a quarter of his students use it, but it has raised some questions. So we want to get more. Ann-Louise Ann-Louise Davidson is director of Concordia University's Innovation Lab. She is the Innovation Strategic Advisor in their Faculty of Arts and Sciences, and she's on the line. Thanks so much for your time this afternoon. Let me begin by asking the question. It sounds like on the surface, this is a good idea, right? Because students, on their own schedule would like to get information. It shows that they're actually doing the work. But there has been some pushback here, right?
Well, of course, I mean, there's a lot of level one answers that students wish they would have, and sometimes they email professors and they ask, when is this due, or, where can I find this reading, or, I have a question about a specific course content or a concept. And, of course, if the answer is a no-brainer, it can be answered very easily by a chatbot. It's an approach that's been used in a lot of industries, and with the large classes that some professors have to teach and the very few resources that they have, it's completely understandable that the level one interactions might be interestingly explored by AI.
But when I say that there's been some pushback, part of the issue here, and I think most people might sort of understand this, is the fact that, when you're going to school, when you're at this level, there is supposed to be human interaction. You have a professor, you want to be able to engage. This obviously takes that away. Is that a concern for you or not?
No, it doesn't take it away at all. It's the human interaction is still very present. What the professor is doing is he's delegating part of the task that is level one, as I said, level one interaction to an AI. He doesn't stop teaching. He doesn't stop answering more specific questions or where he needs to interact, but it's basically delegating very, very minor interactions to a GPT that basically can answer the questions as well as he can. So the repetitive content or the ordinary questions that you would get that sometimes stay in your mailbox will automatically get answered by this GPT. So it's really, I think it sounds a little bit more dramatic when we say, we're replacing the professor by an AI than it really is. It's really, if there's content and it's just hard to get to the content, then if you put it there and you can ask the question and get the answer immediately, then there's really no problem. And it doesn't really take away anything from teaching the actual class or spending more, I'd say even more, spending quality time with the students, answering real questions.
Mm-hmm. I bring this up only because in the article it's pointed out, according to one of the people writing, that said, by using this type of chatbot, and I'm quoting from the article, he says, we are automating one aspect of teaching by ignoring and destroying the personal relationship between a teacher and a student.
Yeah, I think that was a comment from a professor I forget who was interviewed just before me, but that was one. It's one way of seeing it, but there's a difference between what really happens in terms of creating a GPT and when people talk about it. So I think that here we have to sort of like detach what is being said in the news and what's really happening in classes. So GPTs are commonly used for repositories that are much more competent than just putting everything in a Google Drive and go look for it. There was a news around this particular GPT, which was part of some kind of news that seemed quite dramatic. But GPTs have been created since 2022 for courses, and they haven't made the news. So I think it's when you start looking at it, I'd say there's even more interaction if I don't have to answer level one questions that have been said in class, that have been repeated, and I can really look at critical thinking, evaluating, spending more time creating and spending time with students to answer real questions rather than on which page can I find that, or, do you have the recording for this, or do you have the resource for that, or do you have the link for this? So it's really, I think sometimes it sounds more dramatic than it really is.
Sure. But my question, I guess, would be by extension, though, this is the great job it does at what you call level 1. Is it possible to consider that, as it becomes more and more sophisticated, it could take over at the next level and then eventually get rid of professors altogether?
I think there's a fear for that. And granted, it's understandable why people are afraid, but AI does not teach on its own. Professors do more than what AI does. AIs have access to a lot of content. They can summarize, they can synthesize, they could be study buddies. But essentially, they're large language models that get their information from what exists. But the expertise of a professor who is knowledgeable in his or her field or their field is far beyond what AI actually does. So the fear of being replaced is definitely part of what I hear, but it's not what, we cannot reduce the job of a professor in content delivery. So I think I read in that article that the job of a professor or an educator or a teacher is to transmit. I wildly oppose that. Our job is not to transmit. Our job is to see what's happening, prepare the students for what's coming. The content is something that we have to control and we have to be on top of. But the job of a professor is not to go and just get content and chunk it up and recite it or narrate it to the students. There's much more involved in that in terms of what consists of the preparation of students who will hit the market. So how do you prepare a creative mind? Or how do you prepare people to solve the real problems of our society? AI doesn't do that. So it's really a question of making sure that the course content is well adapted to today's reality. And that means if your course is only about reciting content or narrating content, of course you're going to feel threatened. But this calls for a new type of pedagogy.
We leave it at that. I thank you so much for your time. Very much appreciate it.
Introducing Bryan Adams Radio on iHeartRadio. Hosted by Bryan Adams himself.
Join me for an insider look on a wild ride through 40 years of global rock and roll.
Bryan Adams Radio. Now available on the free iHeartRadio app. Or ask your smart speaker to play Bryan Adams Radio on iHeartRadio.
Who's ready to rock?
Everywhere I go, kids wanna rock.